do the seven churches in the book of Revelation prefigure later periods in church history? That's the claim made by Premillennial Dispensationalism, which is the theological system that undergirds the Left Behind series of books, and the book I've described before on the channel, Revelation Unveiled by Tim LaHaye. There are serious reasons for rejecting the notion that each of the churches in the book of Revelation prefigures a future age or period of the church, and in this video we're going to take a look at three of them. If you're new to Theology Project, my name is Matt O'Reilly. I'm lead pastor at Christ Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm taking most of this year to preach through the book of Revelation. So I'm doing a lot of reading on Revelation. Some of my favorite resources are in the description below. Check those out. And if you're a fan of theological reflection on the book of Revelation, you may want to subscribe to the channel because we're going to be talking about it a lot this year. I'm posting my sermons and other videos like this one where I'm interacting with different interpretations and the text of Revelation itself. All right, let's talk about those churches. So the number one reason we should not interpret the churches in Revelation and the seven letters addressed to those churches in Revelation chapter 2 and Revelation chapter 3, prefiguring future periods of church history, is because the text of Revelation does not indicate that it should be read that way. Our first clue to reading this document is the text itself. How does it want to be read? What are the clues that the text provides that give us an idea of how we should come at it? And it doesn't give us anything that says, hey, you should read these letters to these churches as prefiguring future periods of church history. Now, the dispensationalist perspective would come back and say, well, we're using typology, which is common in biblical interpretation, to say that these churches prefigure future periods of the church. And fair enough, typology is a legitimate, common way of interpreting the Bible. Typology is when you have a figure, an event, or a place in redemptive history that typically it's seen as prefiguring the work of Christ, the person of Christ, or some aspect of the work of Christ related to salvation. So in Romans, Paul calls Adam a type of Christ. That is, he's a figure who prefigures Jesus. This has to do particularly in Romans 5 with the way Adam is a covenant representative whose sin creates a serious problem for everyone he represents, in comparison with Jesus, who is a new covenant representative whose obedience means righteousness for everyone he represents. So Adam, in his representative function, prefigures Jesus in his representative function. But that typological interpretation is exegetically warranted. Paul invites us to think about the way Adam prefigures Jesus. So typically, when we're talking typology, there is canonical warrant for thinking about how the previous figure, place, event prefigures Jesus and his redemptive work. When it comes to Revelation and the churches in Revelation, we don't have any kind of textual warrant, right? There's nothing in Revelation that says, hey, Ephesus is a type of the apostolic period. We don't get that. You have to make it up or conjure it up somewhere, right? It's not a textually warranted kind of interpretive conclusion. So typically with typology, there's canonical warrant, exegetical warrant. When it comes to the churches in Revelation, Revelation doesn't tell us to read it that way. So we should. Number two, reading Revelation this way, typologically, where each letter to each church represents a period in church history, makes so much of Revelation so largely irrelevant to most Christians throughout the history of the world. Drawing heavily on Robert MULHOLLAND here in his lectures on Revelation. So the idea is each letter to each church represents a period of time. So Ephesus represents the apostolic age, prefigures it, 30 AD to 100 AD. Smyrna prefigures a period of the persecuted church, 100 AD to early 300s. Pergamum is the church indulgent, so the church like associated with Rome, and from the 300s to the 600s. and so forth and so forth and so forth. And then in dispensationalism, we're now in the Laodicean age. And when that comes to an end, the church will be raptured. That's not in Revelation, but that's the way it's read. And then you get chapter 6 through about 18 are this period of tribulation, right? So here's the thing. If you're in the apostolic age, or if you're in that so-called persecuted age, as if the church hasn't been persecuted in other ages, if you're in that indulgent age, it has to do with something that comes thousands of years after you lived on the earth. So like, why even read it? Because it's irrelevant. And you've got all these other periods of history that have to be worked through the other churches all the way through to the so-called Laodicean age before anything gets relevant to anybody who's alive. So reading Revelation this way, where the churches represent ages in church history, makes most of Revelation generally irrelevant to everyone else who's lived before the present period of time that we're in now. It seems problematic to read a document in the Bible, a book of the Bible, as being largely irrelevant to most of the Christians who've ever lived. So let's not read it that way. Number 3 is pretty straightforward. Revelation itself indicates that all 7 letters to all 7 churches are broadly applicable to all Christians throughout the whole of church history. So each letter ends with these words: whoever has ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So 2 things to notice there. Whoever has ears to hear. Well, do you have ears? Right? Everyone does. Right? This is a way of saying that the things that are written to this specific church, whether it's Ephesus, Pergamum, Laodicea, they are directly applicable to the believers in that church. However, they're broadly and generally applicable to all believers everywhere. So whoever has ears, like if you got ears, listen up. This is relevant to you, whether you live in 600 AD or 1000 AD or 1500 AD or 2025. It's relevant to you, the whole thing, all of it. So whoever has ears to hear, listen to what the Spirit says. And then here's the number 2 thing: listen to what the Spirit says to the churches, right? So whatever is said to each of these churches seems to be applicable to all of them and to all churches across the world and throughout history. So this is the thing. Revelation itself says this is applicable to everybody. It doesn't just prefigure believers in a period of history, telling, folks who live in 400 not to be indulgent in the Roman Empire system. It's more broadly applicable than that. So we really don't need to read these letters as prefiguring or addressing problems in specific ages of the church. Rather, they warn all believers in every age about common problems that need to be guarded against, and other aspects of faithfulness that need to be encouraged across the entirety of church history. So those are 3 reasons we should not interpret the churches in Revelation as prefiguring specific ages in church history. The text simply doesn't invite us to read it that way. In fact, it invites us to read it quite differently. Hey, this is Theology Project. My name is Matt O'Reilly. Love to have you as a subscriber, and we'll be talking a lot more about Revelation in the days and weeks to come. See you soon.